All right, friends, welcome back. Man, I just had a good laugh here with Harp in the green room, and I really appreciate that because the realness, the genuine, the authenticity, and again, we're about talking about writing stories, telling our stories, the true narrative of our lives, and I'm kind of excited. I mean, we just briefly talked about Fred Rogers and some of the stuff there, and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be good. This is going to be good because I know that there's going to be some impact and a lot of really good suggestions or ways that we've lived through, maybe some lessons that we've learned through our own lives. So I'm grateful. Thank you, Harp. I know your full name, Dr. Chris Harper. So, but we're going to call you Harp for here. So thank you. And I appreciate the time that you're willing to spend with us.
Man, I'm so grateful to be here, honored to be on the show with you, and my favorite thing in the whole world is telling stories. So I'm excited to be here with you.
And we're gonna try to keep this to 30 minutes, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, like we got two guys that love telling stories, and we're gonna see how this goes and trying to fit it in with our time frame. So, but let's do this. Let's start with the way that we always start because I love how it builds identity. And I asked the question, who is Harp? So let's say we meet in an elevator. You got about 30, 60 seconds, and I say, who are you? Who is Harp? How would you express who you are to the audience?
And that's such a good question. And who I am is still being determined. It's still being defined, but there are some pillars and there are some definitives in my life. First and foremost, man, I'm a beggar looking for a sandwich, man. I'm a sinner who was saved by grace. I'm a child of the King, and that really is my identity.
Mm,
It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And within that, man, the Lord has blessed me, and I get to be a husband to my best friend Allison, and I get to be dad to Scarlett, Malachi, Calvin, and Oliver. So
mm.
I would probably put it in that order, man. I'm a follower of King Jesus. I'm a husband and I'm a father.
I love that. I love that too. And the fact that you just rattled off all their names, giving shout outs. I love that aspect of it. I mean, our kids are so important too. But
Mhm.
so let's go into this. And this is the way that we always start is because we always have a belief system. We always have a narrative that we've heard as a child or as a kid. And I say this every time, but it's so true. Is sometimes that is a narrative that was spoken to us by
Mhm.
someone that we respect, somebody that was in an authoritative type position. Sometimes it's an assumed narrative that happens because of circumstances or situations or experiences, and we make covenants or promises with ourselves. But what was your narrative that you thought this is how I'm going to live my life? This is how it's always going to be. What were some of the things that you held deeply as beliefs of what your story was going to be like?
Yeah, Tim, that's good, man. And if I'm being honest, my narrative was a part of, I think, the first false narrative ever told. You know, when Satan looked at Adam and Eve in the garden and said, "Eat the fruit, you will be like God." The Hebrew there is, "Eat the fruit, you shall be as Elohim, you'll be God." And he sowed that narrative that you can be so good, you can be so successful, you can be so smart, so strong that you don't need God. And I lived that way for the majority of my life. That was the narrative that I believed, that I lived by, that I could be self-sufficient. I could go to school and I can, achieve these academic accolades, and I can be strong and I can be smart and I can make money, and basically I wouldn't have to need anyone. I
Mm,
could be what the world calls a self-made man,
mm,
and I ran hard after that for probably the first 25, 26 years of my life.
mm. So what started that? And I guess the reason why I bring that up is because it's easy for us to say that, right? Our society tells us, especially when we look at our Western society, is the only way to be a man is to actually pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Where you got this
Right.
John Wayne mentality where we live in isolation or we do it ourselves. And I go back to that old I can't remember if it's a fairy tale or exactly the story. It's like, well, the little red hen, she did it anyway. She just went ahead and
Mm.
she asked for help, but she did it anyway because she was going to do it, right? Our society tells us that. So, is there something else besides the society that embedded that thought into your head?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's, to your point, society, to my upbringing, even reading The Little Engine That Could,
There
right?
you
I
go.
mean, that principle is in there. But for me, I grew up very poor. My family didn't have a lot of money. I grew up kind of in backwoods Kentucky. Not a lot of hope. As a matter of fact, I had one sibling growing up, and he died of a drug overdose. My mother, whom I was closest with, died of cancer. My father, who's still alive, we don't have a great relationship. He's a functioning alcoholic, and there just wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't a lot of prospectus, right? And so I determined at a young age that, man, I was going to be more than this, and no one else was coming to help me, and it's just me. So whether it was through academics, whether it was through athletics, whether it was through personality, I was going to achieve everything that I didn't have, didn't experience, and I was going to do it on my own. And nothing was going to stop me, and nobody was going to get in my way, no matter who I had to hurt, or what I had to connive, or what deception I had to deploy. I was going to be something because I felt like my whole life I was surrounded by nothing,
Mm.
and that's it. It was deeply, it deeply affected me.
In what ways? Like, what was an example of something that you would say this is a great example of how I lived every aspect of my life?
Yeah, I remember I remember the first time I found out I was poor, materially poor. I think all kids grow up, and they don't really have an understanding of money or wealth or status until you turn 10, 11, 12 years old. And I remember being in middle school and coming to the realization, oh, these people live different than me. These people have access to things that I don't have access to. And there was tremendous shame because of that.
Mm.
And I was so materially driven. I mean, it's almost embarrassing to admit, but I was so materially driven by those who had and by those who didn't, and I was in the crowd that didn't. And I would act out to show that I was just as good, or I was just as smart, or I was just as capable, because there was a lot of shame um, in the fact that I didn't have what other people had.
Mm. So, how did that impact you as an individual? Did it shake your confidence, your worth? Did it like make you put on a facade to live as a chameleon? Like, how did that impact your life?
Absolutely. People meet me and they would say, man, he's one of the most confident, he's one of the most assertive, right? He's one of the most gregarious people that we've ever met. And for years that was out of a false self. I was overcompensating for my lack. I was overcompensating for this I feel less than, right? So there was the one narrative, eat the fruit and you won't need God, which is I was living into. But there was that narrative right behind it, that you're so bad and so worthless, God could never love you. And I would literally wake up living between those two narratives, living between those two lies, right? One moment, um, I'd score 20 points in a basketball game and I'd be so confident that, hey, I'm the best athlete in the gym. And then 3 hours later, man, I'm in a fetal position. I'm worthless. Nothing's ever going to come of my life. And it was like, it was like, you know, Christian schizophrenia. I mean, like I feel like David in the Bible. That would just bounce between these emotions, and there was no grounding. So, man, I was acting out of a false self. I was overconfident. I was arrogant. I was manipulative. Um, yeah, yeah. And even sharing this out loud right now, I don't get many opportunities to do this. Most of the times if I'm speaking somewhere or sharing, it's Dr. Chris Harper and the CEO of Better Man and this and
Mm.
that. But people would be, maybe it would be refreshing for them to know that where I am today was born out of this lack of purpose and lack of identity and this wanting to overcome my circumstances.
Well, I so let's touch on that just for a second because you brought it up, and I think this is really an important aspect of our podcast and the way that we are presenting is because we want to get to the real stories. We want to
Mm.
get to what has happened in somebody's life. Too often, because of marketing, and I don't want to blame marketing and I don't want to blame PR. That's how we actually sometimes make a living. That's how we're able to, but there's this negative side to it where we have created a marketing engine in the United States. In order for us to do that, we have to present as somebody who is an authoritative in a specific topic or who is already successful, because people don't want to hear losers. People don't want to actually engage with them. But yet, every individual that I have talked to in every interview that we've had, when we start talking about the real stories, we start to uncover all of the hard knocks that we have had through our lives in order to get to that point. So when I say this and look at this, I guess what I'm challenging is when we say, okay, this was the false narrative that we had. This is the false. If you were to look back and talk to that individual at that time, is there something that you would say to yourself? Is there something that you would be like, hey, you need to wake up? Frankly, I know if I was doing it to me, I was too arrogant and I would never listen to myself coming back, right?
Yeah.
But is there something that you would say back to those individuals that are in that position right now?
Yeah, I would say, um, God loves you the way that you are, right? I was so hungry for attention and I was so starved for a compliment that I would almost do anything to get those two things. Um, whether that was positive attention or even negative attention, because attention is attention. When
Mm,
somebody's taking interest in you, it feels good, whether it's positive or negative. And I think I was so hungry for a compliment. I was so starved for someone saying, "Man, I believe in you," or "You can do this," that I acted out in um, some pretty awful ways. Man, I think the term when I was growing up, I was a ladies' man. You know,
mm,
I was, um, I was not very good to women, and I certainly didn't value women as being created in the image of God. But I looked at women as something, man. They thought I was funny, or they thought I was handsome, or whatever. It was a way to satisfy this deep hole within me, basically. Exploiting women. I don't know any
mm,
other way to say it, and man, that's something I had to repent of and go seek a lot of forgiveness from people. And I think that's just one way it manifests itself out. I think another, even early on in my ministry, and Tim, like I've done ministry backward. Like I started out at a mega church. You know,
mm,
I started where most people want to get to. And I even remember there, I would exaggerate things to feel like, you know, I was important, and pastors always joke about exaggerating, the attendance on Sunday and exaggerating the number of baptisms. Bro, I would flat out lie sometimes
mm.
because I felt inadequate in the room. And I remember one specific meeting, I lied about a number. I mean, I just flat out lied about this number. I was in a meeting of ministry leaders. And I remember I got out to my truck and the Holy Spirit, man, just convicted me and was like, Chris, you just lied to all those guys. And it was hard for me to breathe in that moment. So I went back into the meeting to the facilitator of the meeting and I said, "Hey man, I need to tell you something." He said, "Harp, what's up?" I said, "Bro, I lied." He said, "Lied about what?" I said, "That number I said, that's not true. Like I made that number up." And he started laughing and he said, "Oh, Chris," he said, "nobody was paying attention to you anyways."
Kind of depleted your ego. Oh my goodness.
I'll never forget that, Tim.
Oh
And
my.
but I told him, well, that's fine, but my conscience, I had to come and tell you that I lied. So yeah, whether it was deception, whether it was exploitation, whatever it was, man, I never felt secure in who I was, be
Mm,
it my background, be how I was raised, be it whatever. And it manifests itself in all these negative ways.
mm. So what shook you? Because this is, I mean, there's a way of life here, and I don't know what your age was, but I'm sure that there was a decade plus pattern of acting in this manner,
Mhm.
and not ever feeling secure, like you just said. What shook you? What allowed you to be able to actually start and shift your focus, your perspective, or your mindset? What started that process to start to shift you?
Yeah, I remember I had just got done doing research in Eastern Europe. I was over there with a university doing research, and when I got back, was feeling kind of hopeless. I had chased fame, I had chased fortune, like I had chased academic prowess, right? And it led me empty. I mean, I wasn't rich by no means, and I wasn't famous by no means, but I had acquired some of that, and it still didn't
Mm,
fulfill this hole within me. And I went to a buddy of mine from grad school, and I said, "Where does hope come from?"
mm,
And he said, "You should come to church with me on Wednesday night." And I said, "Man, I'm not interested in that." And I'll never forget Tim. He said, "There's free Chick-fil-A in college girls." I said, "Man, I'm interested." And so I tell people all the time, I went to church for the chicks and the chicken, and I ended up finding where hope comes from.
mm,
After about 2 months of hearing the gospel, I came to the realization that not only had I rejected God, but Tim, I wanted to be God. I wanted to be God. And that's why I could never live up to my own standards. That's why I could never do anything to fill that hole because he's otherly. And when I confessed that and put my hope in Jesus who had reconciled me back to God, man, I found hope upon hope. And this is what I realized in that moment. The Lord never called me to distinguish between my false self and true self. The Lord called me to die to self and live for
mm,
others. And it was in that moment that I had died to self that I declared to God, man, I'm going to start living for other people. And I've been on that journey ever since, man. I still am selfish, and I still wrestle with my identity and security and who I am in Christ, but I'm a lot further along than I was 15, 16 years ago.
mm,
And I've held true to my promise for the last 16 years, man. I've been trying to live for others and be otherly focused.
mm.
It was Augustine who said that we're all born, I forget the Latin, incurvatus homus, I think, with that inward curve, right? It's that
Right.
we're all born with that inward curve, and the Christian life is bending that curve outward towards others. And that's really how I've been trying to live my life the last 16 years.
Mm. So what was there's a lot of times in situations like you make a decision, and I see that consistent with everybody is there's a decision that I need to change. I need to have something different. I don't want to be what this is. I want to be different.
Yeah,
But it doesn't change overnight. Right.
that's
So
right.
what is the process? What like maybe walk us through a little bit more of that process aspect of it, because it's not like boom, instantaneously now you're going to be this brand new person. There's still
Yeah,
habits and there's still routines and things like that that are entered into your life that you've now practiced, like I said, for decades. What's
right.
that process like?
Yeah, so good, man. I describe it as walking through a mist.
Mm,
You walk through a mist long enough, eventually you'll be soaking wet. And you don't even know you're getting wet, but you're getting wet. And for me, the process really revolved around a few things. One, I had to surround myself with people in my life that understood what it meant to live for others. So I started surrounding myself with truly generous people, people who loved Jesus, people who knows what it means to live for others. And man, I sit at their feet. I'm the root word of disciple just means learner.
hmm
And to this day, man, I'm still learning from others. I'm a reader. I read. My favorite thing about reading is reading exposes every original idea I thought I've ever had. Somebody way smarter than me thought of it before me.
Oh, dude, I resonate with that statement. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's so true.
Reading. I tell people all the time, reading is the most humbling thing you can do. And so man, I read to learn. I've got older men in my life that are constantly shaping me. So surrounding myself with older, wiser men and being humble and learning from them. Identifying demons. I mean, that was a big part of it, man. I had a pretty serious girlfriend when I got saved, and we were still sleeping together. And at some point, man, I had to, as the Apostle Paul said, you've got to put childish things away and start acting like a man. When I became a man, I started thinking and acting like a man. I asked the Lord to help me, man. No longer, Lord, help me no longer see women as an object to be conquered, and help me see them as your daughter, right? And He did that for me, man. And it took work. I had to guard my eyes, and I had to break unhealthy relationships, and I had to do some practical things. But over the years, I began to see women as created in the image of God. And let me tell you, Tim, the number one thing that helped me with that was when I had my first daughter.
Mm,
And that was the thing that solidified me,
hmm
in seeing women as God's daughter and not an object. And
mm.
I said my first daughter, she was my first child, and she's my only daughter. But I had to identify some demons, and then I had to force myself to really live for others. I often tell the story about my wife's grandfather is one of the first guys to disciple me and introduce me to my wife. He introduced me to her.
hmm
And as he got older, I used to go cut his grass on Saturday mornings. And probably for the first 3 or 4 months, it just annoyed me. Every Saturday I'd have to get up, I'd have to go cut his grass. I'm wasting my Saturday morning. He'd
Yep.
tell me the same old stories I hear 100 times, right? Every now and then he'd make me get on his roof and blow out his gutters, and it was just annoying. But what's interesting is I kept doing it. And and sure as God, Tim, about the fifth, sixth month, dude, like I would get up and start looking forward to going and serving him in that way. 3, 4 years ago, I preached his funeral, and what I wouldn't give to be able to get up on a Saturday morning and go cut his grass today.
Mm,
And man, it was amazing. The more I started living for others, after a while, the more I started to enjoy it.
mm.
And to your point, it did not happen overnight. And even today, I still get perturbed and a little frustrated when somebody asks too much of me. But if I keep doing it, the Lord shows me that you can come to learn to love it, which is what I've done.
Right. Yeah. And I love that because, like you said, it takes time to be able to develop some of the new patterns and habits and routines that are going to
Mm,
change who it is that you are and the story that you're writing. And you don't just switch from a
right.
false narrative to a true narrative overnight. It takes time and you start to build into that. So let's maybe, and I'll give you the freedom to take the conversation where you'd like to go, but what are some things that you do in order to be able to write that narrative and leave the legacy that you want to have for when you do pass on? What are the things that you do on a daily basis, weekly, monthly? What are some things that you do to be able to incorporate that?
Yeah, yeah, so good. So obviously, being the best husband, being the best dad I can be, and that means living for my family. I think it was Dallas Willard, best definition of love I ever heard. He said, "Love is simply having somebody else's best interest at heart." So it's every day waking up and determining, man, what is in my wife's best interest, what is in my children's best interest, and then meeting that interest, meeting that need. And by the way, I'm not the one that always gets to determine their best interest. They're not the ones that get to determine the best interest. God gets to determine that.
Hmm.
So knowing what's in their best interest, and meeting that need. As you talked about, early in the show, I'm a big Fred Rogers fan. So we have a saying in my house: kindness is king.
Hmm.
Um, uh, we I taught my children early on: say what you mean and mean what you say, but never be mean when you say it.
Hmm.
It's okay to have convictions. It's okay to have opinions. It's okay to be forthright, but it's never okay to be mean. So kindness is king in my home. We practice kindness and shalom, peace, everywhere we go. Every day, I pick 3 people and I encourage them that day. So I've been doing that for probably 5 or 6 years now. Whether that's a phone call, whether it's a text, whether it's showing up, man, I just pick 3 people and I encourage them every day.
Man,
I
wait.
always,
We got to pause. I got to pause on that one. That was actually real. I've not heard that one before. So that was a
yeah,
really cool one because I've heard a lot of different things when people tell you about, practicing the peace and the kindness and everything else. But that encouragement is key. Like, so can you give me like an example? I'll bet you there's some really great stories just on that one.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. Whether it's a phone call, a text message, I'll tell you a tremendous story. On my voicemail. So if you call my phone, there's a 9 out of 10 chance I'm going to send you to my voicemail. And instead of leaving just an average message, hey, this is Chris, leave a note, I actually share a message of hope. It's a 30, 45 second message of hope on my voicemail. And one night I ordered a pizza, and the pizza delivery driver couldn't find my house. Eventually they found it. They had called my phone a couple times. I didn't see it. They had got my voicemail. So I sat down and we opened the pizza box to eat the pizza, and um, taped to the box is a note from the pizza driver that said, I was thinking about killing myself tonight until I heard that message.
Mm.
Tomorrow, I'm going to start looking to see where hope comes from. And that's from a voicemail message, bro.
I love that idea.
It's
The
just that,
impact
just a
alone is
voicemail.
just that's just like I said, I've never heard that idea, so I think this is going to be absolutely key, but I've never heard of that idea as far as just leaving it on there. And honestly, I think I'm going to implement that myself because I'm thinking
Absolutely.
that is such a powerful way to be able to just share a little bit of a hope and a little bit of a positive message to be able to move somebody forward, and you don't know who you're going to impact. So man, I love that idea. So, all right, back on the track here. You said you encourage 3 people every day. I love that story. The impact, man, that's just powerful. What are some other things that you do?
Yeah, a lot of self-care too. Um,
Mm,
the greatest commandment was, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. You can't properly love others if you're not loving yourself. So, I'm pretty strict with my self-care, man. I have an annual trip that I take every year, and it's just for me. Like my kids and wife know that they don't get to come along. So that's my trip. It's where I get out to reflect, to talk to God, to search within me to see if there's anything I need to deal with. So I typically go to the mountains. I have a spot in Montana that I love. So there's some annual self-care. There's weekly and monthly self-care. Just again, I spend a lot of time in reflection, a lot of time in just meditation, a lot of time in the scriptures, man. I'm in the Word every day. And then I'm a social being. Like I love people, so I have a principle in life. I rarely do anything alone.
mm,
I probably speak at 30, 40 conferences and conventions a year. I always bring somebody with me. And it's not necessarily a ministry partner. Sometimes I'm just grabbing a guy I met 2 weeks ago and I said, hey man, come to this conference I'm going to.
mm.
Right. Monthly I host an event called Holy Smokes where a bunch of guys get together to smoke cigars. And and I don't even necessarily like cigars. What I like about a cigar is a good one takes 45 minutes to smoke, and it's just 45 minutes of getting to hear somebody's story, right? And
Mm,
and 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 that's probably the biggest practice. You ask about practices. Something I do, something I taught my kids. It's very anti what we're doing right now, which is even I'm thinking is that when I'm with somebody, if I've got an hour with somebody, I'm going to spend 45 minutes talking about them and
yeah.
and asking about them. Just because, man, I get life when I'm giving life and learning about the life of others.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you breaking that mold for me because that's what I do too. I'm like, I usually
I
ask that.
know.
So you're breaking the mold, and I appreciate that you're doing that for me. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, we're kind of winding down here. Is there something, whether it's something you said or something that's on your heart that you're like, man, if you don't walk away with anything else, I want you to walk away with this one point? What would that one point be?
Man, that's so good. And it's something, thanks for asking that, man. It's something I've been taking to heart lately, probably in the last month. And it's this idea that despite what everybody may think, man, I'm a husband. I'm a dad with 4 kids, right? I still got a toddler that's trying to sleep with us every night. And man, I'm running my kids everywhere. And, you know, I live a pretty ordinary life. Like I'm an ordinary guy and my life is pretty uneventful. But what I'm learning is that doesn't mean it's not abundant.
Mm.
And I think the Lord's doing something in me and a message for other guys that, you know, uh, I want to start making ordinary sexy again.
Hmm.
And man, we don't have to live these YouTube, Instagram platform, Jake Paul jet setting types lives to have an abundant life, man. I'm an ordinary guy. Most days I lead an uneventful existence. And what I'm discovering is there's abundance in that. And that's probably what I would share
Mm.
with people. Yeah.
I love that abundance in the ordinary. It's such a shift
Yeah.
in focus. Taking off the
Yeah.
rose colored glasses of social media and saying, hey, I'm going to live in abundance in my ordinary life. I love that. Love that for an ending. And I know you do a lot of different things, the Better Man Project. You've got a couple of different things that are going on. And just this fact of being real and authentic, one, is I greatly appreciate that. Greatly appreciate the time that you're spending with us. But if something you said resonated, how can people get in contact with you? Maybe they want to go smoke cigars with you. Maybe they want to be part of that holy smoke. How can they find out more about all of those things that you're a part of?
Yeah, absolutely, man. You can check us out at betterman.com. Super simple. Betterman.com. And there's a way to get a hold of me there on the front page. And then I've got a pretty uh consistent Substack following. So I blog twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the Good Trouble blog on Substack, and it's my personal blog, and I'm writing about a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and you can find it Good Trouble, Chris Harper, Substack. It'll all come up. But those are probably two of the easiest, most direct ways to get at me. And if you
Perfect.
do happen live in the DFW area and or even outside the area and you want to join us for our monthly smoke, shoot me an email and I'll get you. We've got a communications director that keeps everybody in the loop. So
I love it.
I'll get you connected with him and would love to connect with you.
Man, I love that. Love that. And so, again, thank you for spending the time. Thank you for sharing. And I'm excited to see where everything goes for you, too. I mean, this is thing that resonated with me is the abundance in the ordinary. I mean, like, that's just going to be the key. But anyway, thank you again. Thank you for spending the time. I really greatly appreciate that.
Tim, thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah. All right. So those that are listening, again, we've got things on YouTube, we've got podcasts, we've got things that are going on. If you missed anything, check the notes. And I, again, want to encourage you, if you are listening and you're struggling to write your story, reach out to us. I know Harp here will love to be able to talk with you. I know myself. Reach out. Let us know how we can help you guys be able to craft and create that story, because there is hope. And every
Amen.
individual story is important. You are valuable. You have worth. And don't ever forget that. So continue to write that story.
Amen.